Hi, everyone. This is Gary Berman, host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show, coming to you with a special micro briefing whose mission it is today to unpack trust and the trust center that has been developed by Sophos. And to help us unpack that is Chester Wisniewski, who's the field CISO, the global field CISO of Sophos. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It's a pretty exciting topic. I think we love to talk about the ways we can earn people's trust, and I think it's really important that the security industry practices that.
Well, and the number one tool that I took away from our call just now before hitting the record button is this notion of transparency. And so what do you think about that? How is the Trust Center relying on the notion of transparency?
Yeah, I think trust centers are an evolving thing. They're popular, especially amongst security companies in the tech space these days. And there's kind of two functions to them. And I think I'm most excited in talking about the transparency side. Another part of it, of course, is a lot of their function is there for things like you need to know that we're compliant with SOC 2 and our certifications and our paperwork for ISO 27001. It's a way to publish a lot of that information publicly to help customers know, those certification kind of things. But I'm much more interested in this transparency side of things because I think, trust absolutely has to be earned, and you shouldn't just have faith that security companies are doing security right because they're in the old adage. I'm sure you've heard, Gary, the shoemaker's children have no shoes, right?
Yeah.
Don't trust that the security companies have the best security in the world because, like every company, they have to make hard decisions every single day about how to spend their money, how to build their products, how to go to market and be successful. And sometimes they may not make the choices that you think they may have made. So we feel it's really important to kind of put as much information out there as possible that we can without compromising our product effectiveness about everything we know about how to build secure products, right? So there's a whole bunch of different aspects to that we could talk about. We publish our root cause analyses when we have incidents, having up-to-date current information and advisories about things that are being impacted, that where we have had service outages or problems that are going on. It could be about how we do secure by design and all the aspects of trying to build a secure product before it ever ships to a customer and ensuring that it's safe and secure. There's lots of different aspects to that, but we feel it's really important to be openly transparent about all of those aspects as much as we can.
Indeed. And one of the things that I really appreciated you mentioned a little bit earlier is how you and the senior management, Joe Levy and others, are very focused on this idea of transparency. And that's not universally the case because of intellectual property and competition and things like that. How do you navigate what you can share and not share and things like that?
Well, I think it's important in this case that it starts at the top. It makes it a heck of a lot easier when the CEO is a big proponent, because then lots of the other senior leadership that I think our leadership is exceptional to be, and everybody probably thinks that at their organization, but I think our folks are pretty amazing, and all we're on
No,
board
by
with
the
it.
way,
But it
no,
certainly
no, no.
helps having the CEO
Yeah,
as a
wait,
proponent.
hold on. You made a statement which I understood the intention, but may not be the case where everyone speaks so well about their own companies. I mean, it's not
Well,
always the case.
yeah, I mean, I've been at Sophos 22 years. I wouldn't have been here this long if I didn't have faith in my
Right.
leadership. I mean,
Exactly.
I have a lot of confidence in our leadership. But as far as about going about that, it is challenging, right? Because you're worried about trade secrets. You're worried about it. If we disclose how this thing works and went wrong, maybe a criminal will find a way to go around it that could harm someone. And we do have those debates. We have to have those debates. And my team right now is responsible for publishing our root cause analyses, where we kind of pull back the covers more than any other area of the trust center, and as part of our transparency goes. And I was talking to our CISO, Ross McKercher, about this a couple weeks ago because, I have to get approval from the product team that there's nothing in there that could harm the product in any way. I need to get approval from the engineering team that we've accurately portrayed the incident, that we understood it properly and we explained it in a clear way to the public to understand the problem. But I also need to get, approval from the security team that we're not sharing something we shouldn't share. And like we've defined the line as I should feel uncomfortable releasing this, but after reading it a second time and convincing myself that it's the transparency is more important than the risk, then we publish it, right? We should always be on that edge. If you look at that report that you're going to publish to the to be transparent, and you're like, oh yeah, no problem, that one's clear. Maybe you haven't tried hard enough. Like you should always be trying to push yourself to that level of transparency that makes you slightly uncomfortable, and that's probably the right spot.
Indeed, and that's a really astute analysis. And I'm just wondering, from Sophos core business, is it accurate to say that you're enterprise focused, or do you also try to serve mid-market or SMBs?
So the majority of our business today is in the mid-market and SMB. We do have enterprise
Oh,
as well, but what I would say our mix is probably the opposite of some of the other big players, and that a lot of them come heavy enterprise and then they try to come down market.
right.
Our bread and butter is the middle, and while we serve enterprises and we have lots of large customers uh, by the numbers, just like I mean, if you look at small businesses in America outnumber every other kind of business by like 1,000-fold. And then, as you go up, obviously there's fewer and fewer and fewer. And I think our mix looks very much like the whole market mix, which is lots of small, a whole bunch of medium, and a
Right.
smaller number of enterprise, kind of mirroring the commercial market.
One of the things that you were saying that caught my attention was really just your title, Global Field CISO. Can you unpack each of those words as it relates to Sophos?
Sure. I run the team, and so I have the global responsibility for all of the field CISO operations at Sophos, which ultimately means when we don't have somebody in the field somewhere, I have to cover for it. um, but so yeah, I mean, so that's the global aspect of that. I kind of run the global team and kind of set the global agenda for what we're doing, what our goals are, and try to help set the standards and practices that we use when we're interacting with our clients and partners and people in the field. Within Sophos, the field aspect of the field CISO is literally to engage at the CISO level outside the business. And a lot of that ends up being as an interface between our security practices and the outside world. So that might be conducting a CISO roundtable and sitting with other CISOs and talking about, my team doesn't talk about products, we talk about risk. We're there to have risk
Oh,
discussions with the customers because that's the CISO level conversation that we're really having. Like most CISOs honestly probably don't care which brand of firewall necessarily is in the network. The question is it addressing the risk that they have in their business? Is it configured in a way to address that risk, or what risk does it present to their business, perhaps even? So conversations at the executive level usually are focused on business outcomes and risk and not so much on the technical details of products. We have plenty of smart people that are out in the company to go out and talk about the products
right.
and how they address specific technical things. But my team is much more intended to be having that CISO level conversation with organizations. Obviously, smaller companies, as you and I were talking, preparing for the podcast, don't always have a CISO. And so, the role has to adapt differently there. But that's a lot of that is filled by our partners and service providers that use and sell our products out there. So if they're representing 100 of our small business customers and doing that on their behalf, then my team would interact with that partner in that conversation about how we address their risks. And then they can, apply it at the individual client level for those smaller companies.
So that would be MSPs or MSSPs. Is that your
Precisely. Yeah.
channel strategy generally, or?
Yeah. I mean, there's a mix of things out there these days because, we have a large MDR service and incident response service. So a lot of MSSPs are simply reselling our service in a lot of cases into those customers. But many of the larger ones with very active security consultancies want to do that work themselves. They might use our products and choose to directly own the day-to-day management of the SOC for their customers or those kinds of things. So there's a whole mix of ways that happens out in the field. And then as far as the my team's interaction with that, it's generally always going to be at the level of somewhere in the chain of who's providing those services. There's a person who's responsible for managing the risk of that individual customer that's at the end. Whoever that person is generally who we're targeting with our interactions. So, when I'm at Black Hat, I'll be trying to meet as many of the CISOs as
Right.
I possibly can that that from our clients that are coming out, but that doesn't represent those smaller customers. So in those cases, it's kind of often proxied through those MSSPs or MSPs.
Well, and to build on that point, I mean, one of the things we were talking about a little bit earlier is the distillation of the complexity of all of this, of cybersecurity for a mid-market or SMB, where, you know, it's an entrepreneur and that's just not their career path. They don't know too much about it. And oftentimes, at least I would like to get your impression of this, there's this notion that they don't have anything worth stealing or encrypting.
Yeah, there's well, I think they don't recognize how widespread these attacks and problems
Mm,
are. Like the Russians aren't going to come after my small business in Iowa. They're only after the things I hear about on TV. You know, they hacked Sony, they hacked Target, they hacked JBS Meats. They're not coming after my little machine shop that makes parts for Ford Motor Company to attach the mirrors to their cars. And it's like, actually, they're coming for anything that's not nailed to the floor.
yeah, for
Like
sure.
they're gonna, if you have something of value, they're going to steal it. And you think about even a small business, maybe you have 50 employees. When you have that money in the bank account on Friday for payroll, that's a chunk of money.
Yeah.
And if I can steal that money, that's well worth my time as a thief to steal it. And we also have to remember that a lot of the thieves in many of these cases are from are desperate themselves and from countries that have very different economies than our own. And $1,000 goes a really long way in Bangladesh, and it might not seem like much to you, but the amount of damage stealing that $1,000 costs you often is hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So there's a disproportionate impact as well. Like, you know, you hear about a ransom attack, it's like, okay, the ransom was $50,000, but it costs you $1 million to recover, right? So I don't think organizations understand how disproportionate those recovery costs are to the incidents they hear about, because we're always talking about the ransom demand or the extortion and not talking about the incident. The incident's much bigger and much more impactful than that. And the emotional stress on people too is just devastating.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier about the research that Carnegie Mellon US CERT did on insider trading, insider threats, you know, rather, and there were actually, if memory serves me, 54 little boxes in a matrix. There were maybe 15 across the top and like another 15 or 20 down the bottom of the impacts on a small and medium businesses. So it could be reputational damage, could be psychological damage, emotional damage, financial. What do you think SMBs need to do to improve their security posture based on what Sophos provides?
Yeah, I mean, my experience doing this for so long is that we've reached a point where it's unrealistic for a company with less than 1,000 people, unless they're in a specialty industry, to likely be able to manage their own security needs without some outside help. And IT teams these days are much more tied to how they're going to grow, help a business grow, and provide tools to enable that business to grow their revenue. And security is a time consuming thing that they have just got to do as well. And so when it's like, oh, we can move our email to Microsoft's cloud and get all these efficiencies and cost savings, or we can go and patch all the servers, they prioritize moving their email to the cloud because it's going to enable the business, or maybe adopting Salesforce for their salespeople. Or there's, you know, IT is a business enabler, and security often gets in the way of that. So it continually gets put off to the side. And a report that we just published on the state of ransomware in businesses under 500 seats, the number one reason they got ransomed was about a security issue that they knew about but hadn't addressed.
Wow.
And so it's like they knew they had gotten the pen test that their cyber insurance required them to have, and the IT team understood that it was important, and they got the list. They just weren't able to address the critical items on that list in time before the criminals were able to exploit that same finding, right? And so I feel like the best approach for smaller organizations, certainly sub 500, but probably sub 1,000, and really, in my opinion, is to have your IT team focus on your business's specific needs about what's unique about your business and security. Hopefully, maybe you have a security team. Most organizations under 1,000 don't have a security team. It's usually within their IT group. and have a managed service provider or an MDR provider handle the day-to-day threats, the things of actively monitoring those firewalls and knowing whether that's an active attack that somehow is penetrated and requires a threat hunt or an investigation. Because the scaling of understanding the threat is really hard to do as an individual small organization. Staying on top of these threats is incredibly challenging, even for those of us that have done it for our entire careers.
Right.
Doing that in addition to managing the email servers and all the other things that IT has to do is a really big ask. So I think it really is time that MSSPs and MDR functions take over most of that and let the IT team focus on what's best for enabling your business and what unique threats you may have in your particular sector.
One of the things that we mentioned also a little bit earlier was this role of virtual or fractional CISOs to help fill the talent gap that would exist for mid-sized companies and small to medium businesses. What's your assessment of the state of CISO talent these days? That's a big question, but like, how's it going, I guess, is another way of.
Oh, it's all over the map. It feels like it's in transition, in my opinion. Certainly, early CISOs, in that being a career, largely came from technical backgrounds and then learned the business aspects of it. And I feel like that certainly in the biggest companies in America that I've dealt with and talked to at events in the last couple of years, it feels like there's a movement toward more business executives in the CISO role, surrounded by an expert team of technical advisors that
Oh,
came up through the ranks in tech. Um, I can't explain to you why necessarily that is the case, but I believe that more and more the CISO is becoming an equal seat at the table with the other C levels in the business. And it requires an executive leader who knows how to speak their language and has been in their position to understand how to communicate both the risk and the budget requirements to them in a way that they understand better without the jargon and the lingo and all the stuff that we have a tendency to do as technicians that have come up through the ranks. I think they're able to connect more effectively with the other business leaders within the business, but they recognize
well,
that they
you
don't
hit
have the
the
tech chops, right? So they
for
know they got to be surrounded by good tech people.
yeah, forgive the interruption, but you really hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about risk, and that's the business conversation that the business people in an organization can relate to, and how to quantify that risk, and ideally, improve the security posture. Well, I could listen and learn, from you all day, Chad. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes with me. Um, can you send a copy of the report, or where can our
Absolutely.
audience get a copy of the research that you talked about?
Yeah, if you go to news.sophos.com and you type state of ransomware, or I'm sure if you type state of ransomware into your favorite search engine, you'll find it right away. We also have another report that's based off of all of our active incidents that we handle on behalf of our small and mid-market customers called Active Adversary, that we literally break down every year and just go, okay, of the 400 cases of ransomware that we had to respond to, here's 38% of them started because something was unpatched. And we kind of break down all the stats of what is leading organizations to fall victim, so we can figure out where to focus our energies on trying to prevent more of these kinds of things. And that's available at sophos.com/active adversary.
Adversary. And if our audience wants to get in touch with you.
You can find me on LinkedIn, and I also hang out on Mastodon as far as social media goes. And folks can always drop me a line at chesterw@sophos.com.
Well, Chester, on behalf of a grateful digital universe, thanks so much for who you are and for what you do, and most importantly, why you do it. And to our audience, stay tuned for more from the Cyber Hero Adventure Show.